Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. This is episode 15, and I'm your host, Brian Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of some of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. Be sure to like and share the program as well. You can also support the program by going to Anchor FM or Spotify and clicking the support button. We also have program sponsorships available. To learn more, email me directly at thetallybill@gmail.com. That's thetallybill@gmail.com. Folks, we have a very special guest joining us on today's program. It's not every day you have the opportunity to sit down with an ordained minister, a state house representative, as well as a chairman of one of the most successful veteran programs in the country. Today, we are honored to be joined by State Representative Steve Toth. Representative Steve Toth is a small business owner representing South Montgomery County in the Texas House of Representatives. With a background in business, consulting, and construction, Steve and his wife, Babette, currently run the pool service company, My Pool Expert. As an ordained minister, Steve serves as chairman of the board of Mighty Oaks Foundation, ministering to veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. In the Texas House, Representative Toth has successfully passed laws addressing county government ethics reform, parental visitation rights at school, and the elimination of critical race theory in the classroom, just to name a few. In 2022, Young Conservatives of Texas ranked Steve Toth number one for having the most conservative voting record in the Texas House. With that, we are honored to be joined by the man himself, Representative Steve Toth from the great state of Texas. How are you, sir?
Good to be with you, brother.
It is always a pleasure to be with you, sir, a great friend and a mentor of mine. So I do sincerely appreciate the time that you are offering me today, as well as our listeners out there.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Brian. Mentor, I don't know, man. You and I are iron sharpening iron. I think it's a good thing that God brought you into my life.
Same. I definitely have a mutual agreement there. The feeling is definitely mutual. I know you are a very busy man and you wear a lot of hats, and hey, we're even coming into election season, so things are getting ready to heat up here in the state of Texas. And I just thought I'd talk to you a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and and where you're headed. So I guess first things first, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little town in North Texas called Rochester, New York. And so I'm the epitome of wasn't born here, got here as quick as I could. And it was a pretty conservative area in upstate New York. In fact, New York, if you get outside, an hour outside New York City, it's actually a pretty conservative state. The problem is, over half the people of New York live in the city, in the surrounding area. So it's corrupted by that. But I grew up on 4 acres. We had a horse, and I didn't wear Cortez Nike sneakers in high school. I wore Fry boots. I was bound for Texas.
There are a lot of really good countrysides in New York, especially upstate New York. Very, very conservative, beautiful. And it's definitely a very great place to have probably grown up. And having been, there and grown up there, do you have any childhood memories of that?
Oh man,
Of New York?
yeah, so many. So and again, it was a pretty rural area where we grew up, and we grew up next to. I mean, we were right in between cornfields and wheat fields, and it was a very rural area. And
Mhm.
in the summertime, after I graduated from high school, I worked at a Young Life camp up in the Adirondacks driving parasail boats. And it was just a great experience growing up. The lakes in New York are all they're the kind made by God. They're not dammed up. They're not artificial lakes. They're real lakes. And
Mhm.
it was just I grew up on the water and skiing and water skiing and snow skiing in the wintertime, and it's
Mhm.
just great. Very thankful. And it's a bygone time, period. I mean, it really is. I mean, I talk to family that still lives there, and all those days, it's a different day and age for us now as
Mhm.
the assault on the family has gone into high gear in New York.
Are kids doing a lot of those same activities that you grew up doing, or is that
Well,
kind of just?
no, I guess those things are still acceptable and allowed,
Mhm.
but it's the inculcation in the public schools in New York. Now, we used to, at Christmas time, we used to sing Christmas carols in the school, and that's verboten now. Can't do that. Can't sing Christmas carols. That's not acceptable.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a shame, and I know, we've got some changes that have been occurring here lately, very, very rapidly. And, I know you have fought very hard to kind of settle things down a little bit, at least here in Texas. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I wanted to ask you what inspired you to pick up and move to Texas?
Um, in 1997, I had an opportunity to come here uh, with Johnson and Johnson,
Mhm.
and I thought I'd be here for 18 months. That I would come down as director of marketing for this young startup company. I would do, I would do all their primary and collateral advertising, and then we would be sold in a year and a half, and I would just come back where all my family is. But I just absolutely fell in love with Texas, and it's kind of like when you quit banging your head against the wall, it really feels good.
Mhm.
And I guess it's kind of like what it was like. It was kind of like, wow, this is what it's like to really be free. This is what the founding fathers had ordained for our nation. And in some respects, I kind of followed the same path as somebody that was born in 18. I think he was born in like uh, 1820, 1818. His name
Mhm.
was John Hubbard Forsyth, and he left Avon, New York, went down to Kentucky, and then found his way to the Alamo. And Captain Forsyth led the final defense of the Alamo. And
Mhm.
funny that it was a New Yorker that led the final defense of the Alamo. But I think the history of Texas is that we've drawn liberty minded people since our inception, since our birth. And it's just become part of our DNA that if you want to live free and you want to love liberty and you want to love rugged individualism, Texas is the place to come.
So I got a question for you. How long was Texas calling you before you actually picked up the call and answered it and said, you know what? I'm all in and I am en route? I know you said 97, but did it begin to call you in the early 90s and you just kind of put it off a little bit just in the back of your head? And then one day you said, okay, it's time. I'm out.
So you peppered me with some questions that you're going to ask me, and it's so funny that you're asking me this question because I had no idea you're going to ask me this. But growing up in high school, my hero was Phil Gramm, Senator Phil Gramm.
Mhm.
Isn't that funny? And when Phil Gramm ran for president, I was the only person probably in all of New York that was like, I love Phil Gramm. He's my guy. So I guess that God was doing something in my heart and soul that was preparing me long before 1997 to love Texas and want to come here.
God works in mysterious ways. I have seen it firsthand, not only in my life over the last 6 years, but what I'm currently going through right now with this podcast. This is my second week, and it feels like I've been doing it for decades. I've just kind of just sat right in here, and it's flowing smoothly, and I'm loving it. And I've got great guests, and God is really working in me right now, and it just feels great. And to have that support. So we all know how these special things work out when you are called.
Yep.
That leads me to my next point. I was never really a very religious man. I grew up Catholic. I was baptized at an early age in Youngstown, Ohio, at a beautiful cathedral, stained glass, beautiful. But I never really went to church. I never really prayed. Now, of course, when people ask, do you believe in God? It was always, well, yes, of course I do. And if you are ever going through some hard times, I would always call on God, like, God, and do some small praying, but not a lot, until I was recruited to go to a program by the name of Mighty Oaks. And it just happened to be yesterday was my 3-year anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Of me going through the program and graduating from Mighty Oaks, and not only getting closer with the Lord and learning a lot of things about life, but also meeting a lot of other like-minded individuals, a lot of other veterans that were going through similar situations, and to kind of grow together to learn this curriculum was an absolute life-changing experience. I want to know from you, from Representative Steve Toth himself, what's it like being on the board of Mighty Oaks?
Brian, I'm convinced that the greatest things in life aren't things we find. It's the things that find us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of my experience with Mighty Oaks. It was in 2010, around, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 days before Christmas, and it was a Sunday. I had fallen asleep on the couch, having watched something on TV. And my phone went off, and it was Michelle from New York saying, "Steve, have you heard Kevin died?" And I'm like, wait, what? I mean, it was like I was woken out of a deep sleep. I was like, is this a dream? Kevin was my best friend. I was godfather to one of their kids. And Kevin had taken his life the night before. And this is one of my closest friends. He struggled with alcohol, and it just destroyed me. And she called me up and told me that he had taken his life, and asked me if I'd come up. She called me back an hour later and said, "Would you come up and do Kevin's funeral service?" And it was just a surreal week where I just pinched myself that this guy who's, 6'1", handsome, Kevin could do everything. He was the most charming person you'll ever meet. He had a great singing voice, loved music. He had a wonderful family, wonderful wife, beautiful children, a successful orthodontic practice. In orthodontia, it's like, it's a profession where it's like you can plant a money tree in your backyard, and if you're halfway decent at what you do, you're going to make a minimum of $200,000, $300,000 a year. And anyways, he just had this great life, had everything that the world could look at and say, this should make a person happy. And but Kevin just struggled with some demons from his past that he never really dealt with. And I really, in many respects, feel like I failed him as a friend. in that I wasn't more intentional about speaking truth into Kevin's life. And I just really purposed after I flew home from his funeral that I was not going to be mamby-pamby with guys again, that I was going to speak the truth into the lives of young men or any man for that matter that asked. And so I guess it was, a few months later when Kathy Robichaux called me up or sent me a text message. I was the pastor on call that day.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I've got biblical grounds to divorce my husband, and I'm going to leave him unless you can give me a reason. And I looked at Kathy later on that day when I met her at Starbucks, and I said, God just put it on my heart to say this to her. I said, Kathy, you've been praying for your husband, Chad, for years, and you're on the cusp of God doing something really great in his life and saving and redeeming him and your marriage and your family. Are you going to quit now on the cusp of God doing something great? And that started a relationship that Babette and I had with Chad and Kathy for the next year and a half, as we walked with them. And Chad walked away from being a world champion force. He was a Force Recon Marine. I guess you're always a Marine, aren't you, Brian?
Yes, sir.
But he walked away from being a world champion MMA fighter to start this ministry called Mighty Oaks. And God has just done so many great things in and through it that it just astounds me.
When Kathy reached out to you, did she reach out to you because you were an ordained minister, and she just wanted some good biblical advice, or was this something that you had a personal relationship?
No, I didn't. We didn't know each other. In fact, the only reason that I ended up getting this call, and again, this is the providence of God, because the pastor that was supposed to have the pastor pager that weekend decided to take a 3-day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was gone on Monday, and Jay gave me the pager. And so I was the one that got Kathy's call. And so the very first time that I met with Chad, I was just having none of his stuff. And he said, look, I've got this 10-point plan on how I'm going to turn my life around. I took a look at his piece of paper, and it didn't include God. And I said, it's not going to work. I pushed it back in his face, and I said, this is a failure, and you're going to fail again. He's like, why? And I said, because your plan doesn't include God. Because only God can transform you. Only God can transform your wife. Only God can transform your marriage and your family. Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to do it his way, I don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to waste my time. And I'm just real direct with guys as a result of, I guess, things I've gone through in my life.
Mm-hmm. So do you ever go out to Mighty Oaks and maybe spend a day or two and kind of watch the instructors go through the training process and get to meet other veterans when you show up, at these events? Yeah.
In fact, I got together with Morgan Luttrell, our soon-to-be Congressional District 8 member of Congress. And Morgan, several months ago, he and I had breakfast, and I said, do you know Ben Ives? And he goes, Ben Ives? He goes, if Morgan's is a Navy SEAL. And he said, Steve, if you came up with, if I could name 1,000 names that I'd named before, Steve Toth would name Ben Ives. But Ben's a SEAL Team 6 member. And I went through Mighty Oaks probably 6 or 8 years ago. And when I went through it with Ben Ives. And I went through the whole program, the whole 5-day program. And so I wanted to see it as a board member, exactly what these guys go through. Mm-hmm. And it's an amazing program. And the cool thing is that men, veterans, men and women, we do a women's program too, but mm-hmm. from all walks of life, from all the branches of service. And I was surprised at how many Wounded Warrior Battalion guys go through the program. A third of the guys that the week that I was there were from the Wounded Warrior Battalion. Mm-hmm. TBIs.
Yeah, the Wounded Warrior Battalion is big in Camp Pendleton. As a matter of fact, when I went there, we actually stopped by there on Camp Pendleton as I was living in Temecula.
Yeah.
And we picked up, I want to say, 3 or 4 Marines from the Wounded Warrior Battalion, and we just shuttled north. And, it was life-changing for all of us. So I
And
did.
these are the guys too, that because of TBIs,
Mhm.
traumatic brain injuries, science and medicine has said, can't do anything for you. Sucks to be you.
Mhm.
But here's a bunch of psychotropic medications that we're going to put you on for the rest of your lives.
Mhm.
But it is the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ that can bring healing to these men. It's amazing. God is amazing.
And open doors and create new opportunities and really
Yeah.
put gratitude on your heart.
Yeah.
And once you have that sense and you're feeling better and you're happy and you're able to do the things that you didn't really used to do before because you were stuck in a room or you were depressed or you were battling anxiety. Now you can go out and you can enjoy that life and begin to heal, and that is obviously the mission
Right.
of Mighty Oaks. And so we know that you're an ordained minister. You own a small business here in the Woodlands. You serve on a board, Mighty Oaks. I mean, one would say, wow, you are a very, very good contributor to society and a community leader. And then, I look down your resume and I'm like, wow, this guy is even a state house representative in
Don't hold
Texas.
that against me.
Yeah. And so
politicians, we're right up there with copier salesmen and used car salesmen.
Well, I know there's been a bunch of sessions here as of late over the last year and a half, special session after special session. You guys have been very busy. You guys have been all over the national news. I mean, politics is messy, it's dirty, it's filthy, it's mudslinging, and it is no fun. And you have found yourself directly in the middle of it. And the only question I have for you is what inspired you, Steve Toth, to run for office?
Did you fall on your head, Steve? Did you fall out of a stupid tree and hit every branch on the way down? What made you want to do this? A job that only pays $600 a month. Come on, seriously, Steve? So
is that $600 a month only when you're in session, or is that $600 a month for every month that you are in act? It's a 2-year term, right?
Yeah, so it's $600 a month, and then there's a per diem once you're in session.
Mhm.
That it's called a per diem, but it's taxed. It's taxed like it's regular income. So you don't make a lot off it because you end up losing like 40%. So, but it covers. It's supposed to cover your living expenses while you're here, the 5 months that you're here every 2 years. But the reason why I did it, that's your question. It was 2009, I think, when Texas passed this silly bill called the Pool Light Safety Bill. And it was the whole, they told people that, they told Texans that thousands of people were dying in swimming pools from being electrocuted by pool lights because they weren't being installed the right way. When the reality is that no one in our industry was installing pool lights incorrectly. The only people that were dying in swimming pools were typically commercial swimming pools where they would bring in a licensed electrician, master electrician, that had never bonded or grounded one of these pool lights in a wet environment. They weren't experienced with it. But what happened was the Electrical Workers Union wanted, because there was a downturn in the economy, there wasn't a lot of building going on, and they thought, well, one of the biggest industries in Texas is pools. We can snag some of this business from them if we institute licensing, because they're too stupid. They can't get a license. And so, the reality is that my guys had to take a book that's 675 pages in length, study it, and it had nothing to do with pools. I could tell you how wide a countertop has to be. I can tell you Brian, how high an outlet has to be above a counter, how far apart they need to be, but there's nothing in the book that had anything to do with pools. And it was really hard because a lot of guys, this wasn't their world. Their world wasn't residential electrical. And so a lot of them struggled to pass the test. My guys struggled to pass the test, but it didn't do anything to help the average Texan. In fact, the average Texan before this licensing was paying about $45 an hour for someone to come out and work on their equipment. And within 1 year, went from $45 an hour to $95 to today. Most companies charge about $115, $120 an hour for a licensed pool tech to come out and work in your pool. It was a scam. And I just got angry about it. And I ran against one of the guys that joint authored the bill and beat him.
How did this come about? Who was behind this?
The swamp. This is the swamp. These are lobbyists that come together for the electrical workers and say, we can get part of this business. These stupid pool builders, they don't have their own lobby. And because we didn't have our own lobby, we ended up paying dearly for it. A lot of guys went out of business. We're the ninth largest economy in the world. Texas is. And if you're a small business owner and you don't have a presence here in Austin, don't be surprised if you get stepped on. And we got stepped on because we didn't have a presence here in Austin.
This is really shocking to me because I never knew that there was a such thing as a pool lobby.
There is. Yeah.
Like a swimming pool lobby.
There is a swimming pool lobbyist. Yes. That we as small business owners, we pay the money, and we pay them money so that they come to Austin and they tell politicians to leave us alone.
Now, I do know, one of the biggest things, about swimming pools, would be, the risk of drowning. So I know a lot of, states have laws that say you need to put up a fence. If it's in your backyard, that's, a certain height or whatever, and it's got to have a certain type lock. And if the back door isn't automatically triggered to letting you know when that door is opening, is, I know a lot of laws and legislation about that, but I've never heard anything about pool lights.
Right. Well, the thing now too is that in this past session, there was a little boy, his name was Judah Brown, and Judah was like 3 years old, and he got into a pool, fell into a pool, and he drowned. And his mom and dad, who were just faithful followers of Christ, it was just a devastating deal for Christy and Marka to lose their boy. And they turned that tragedy the same way you turned your tragedy into a blessing for a lot of people, in that they came to Austin, met with me, and we carried the Judah Brown Drowning Prevention Act. And what it was is we had POAs all over the state of Texas, Property Owners Association, Homeowners Association, that would not allow people to put safety fences around their pool. And the problem with these 4-foot iron fences is that they're too low, and kids can get over them pretty easily.
Jump right over them.
Yeah, they just climb right over them. And so there is new technology that people can put around their pool, and these POAs are like, oh, it's not pretty enough. We're like, shut up, dude. I mean, it's not about being pretty. It's about keeping kids from drowning. Drowning is the number one way in which accidental deaths occur among children in the state of Texas. Drowning. It's not car accidents.
Wow.
It's not being run over. It's not bike accidents. It's not skateboard accidents. It's drowning. And, we just wanted to empower parents that they can make the best decision for how to keep their kids safe without some chump serving on an HOA that maybe got bullied a lot as a kid, which is why he wants as an adult to throw his power around on an HOA or a POA. Excuse me, but this gets me worked up.
Yeah, I know how that is on the HOAs and the POAs and the power trips. And those are definitely no fun. And I don't even know how some of those people even have the ability to even serve in those positions, because from what I see, they have very little to no experience really in anything, and to include communication and how to write even. I mean, these people are very, all they care about is power. And to me, that's a very quick and easy way to lose the faith of your neighborhood.
Exactly.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about election season. It is heating up here very, very quickly. We are going to be in November before you know it. And, and I know you're running to get reelected for your fourth term. Are there any important agenda items for you that you are going to be running on?
Yeah, we're gonna work more on election integrity.
Mm-hmm.
There are problems with the election system. In 2016, Democrats cried, "Russia, Russia, Russia." They were convinced that Vladimir Putin was inside every electronic voting machine. You had Amy Klobuchar, who ran for president in 2020, that in 2019 said voting machines are inherently dangerous. Voting machines have been compromised. This is Democrat Amy Klobuchar stated the election system is flawed and it's ripe with fraud, electronic fraud. And in 2020, Republicans were convinced that there was fraud that took place in multiple states in the union. And I think it's important, as upwards of 67% of Americans believe that there is fraud in the election system. I think it's important that we reestablish the trust in our constitutional republic, our democratic constitutional republic, in the voting system again. So I still think that we have some means by which, some areas where we need to tighten things up and make sure that people believe in our election system again.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to make sure that this is kind of a controversial deal, but 80% of children that are struggling with gender dysphoria, 80% of them will desist by the age of 22. So a little boy that wants to be a little girl that wants to be a little boy, 80% of them will desist by the age of 22. So with that in mind, why are we putting kids on puberty blockers? Why are we allowing little girls to cut their breasts off? Why are we allowing little boys to cut their penises off when 80% of these kids will desist by the time they're 22?
What does that mean exactly?
It means that European study after European study, hundreds and hundreds of children looked at that have been followed in longitudinal studies, that a little boy that wanted to be a little girl that wanted to be a little boy, by the time they're 22, they desist from that and they go back to identifying with their biological gender, their biological sex. And so again, why would we, in all, with just being sensible, why would we allow a 5-year-old to determine when they're confused into allowing them to persist in transitioning? Why would we allow that until they're 22? I want to put a stop to that.
How did we get here, Steve?
I don't know, buddy. I mean, when Bill Maher starts making more sense than the president of the United States, I think we got problems. I mean, Bill Maher said, the other day on Politically Incorrect, he said, if we allowed every 5-year-old to determine what they want to be when they grow up, our nation would be filled with cowboys and princesses. It's silly, it's insane. Yet we're putting little kids, little girls, little boys on puberty blockers at the ages of 5 and 6. These have been deemed completely dangerous, and there have been no long-term studies, but yet in Great Britain, they will not allow doctors to put children on puberty blockers anymore because they've been deemed to be dangerous. Just from anecdotal studies, long-term studies are showing that girls that go on puberty blockers endure osteoporosis by the time they're in their 20s. Not just bones, but their teeth fall out. The FDA came out 2 weeks ago and said that there's brain swelling among children that go on these puberty blockers, heart disease, heart problems. 20-year-old men have a penis the size of an 8-year-old by the time they're 20. All sorts of problems. I mean, it's immeasurable. You can't have an orgasm when you grow up to be an adult. You can't. It makes you infertile, male or female, if you go on these puberty blockers. And yet we're allowing kids to do this to themselves at the tender age when there's a lot of confusion in their lives. I mean, it's insane.
I wonder what's going through the minds and the hearts of these doctors
and parents.
Yeah,
I mean, just
obviously, of course, the parents number one. But in addition to that, there's a doctor that will also make a decision too, and I just can't see that doctor working in the best interest of that child patient. And that right there, I mean, that right there in its own right it's frightening. It really is.
It really is crazy frightening. So I used to work for the Harris Poll. We did statistical analysis for, we did, we would do everything from focus group studies to hardcore longitudinal research studies. And Brian, if you took a 4 foot by 4 foot square and you had 10 rows vertically and 10 rows horizontally, you'd wind up with 100 squares. And if you threw a can of pennies up into the air, you wouldn't wind up with one penny on every single square. You would see a circle of predominantly where the pennies were, which would mean that in the four corners, you wouldn't see any pennies, but you would see some clusters. You would see some random clusters of pennies, but by and large, there'd be a pretty broad consensus, broad spattering of pennies in this 4 foot by 4 foot square. Well, if you look at the cluster of children that want to transition today, it's predominantly little girls that want to be boys. But it's all made up of clusters, and it's predicated predominantly within social media circles. So this has nothing to do with biology. This has nothing to do with science. This has everything to do with a stream of thought that's being conveyed to these kids through social media. So little girls that struggle with, they're not tall enough, their hair isn't blonde enough, their eyes aren't blue enough, their eyelashes aren't beautiful enough, their breasts aren't big enough. Well, social media says, well, it's because you're trapped in the wrong body. And immediately, as soon as you say, well, I'm trans, I want to be a little boy, or a little boy that wants to be a little girl. Boom, you're right away. You're going to find a community of people that are going to affirm you and welcome you in. And rather than looking at it and saying, okay, what are you struggling with right now? And what are the hurts that you're dealing with in your life? And just loving kids through this painful, difficult time. Let them see what they want to do when they're 22. But the idea of putting them on puberty blockers or cutting their penis off, in Austin right now, if you have a little girl that wants to be a little boy, she has a 6-month wait for top surgery in Austin, in the Austin area right now. It's insane. It's just freaking insane. It's child abuse.
Incredible. Want to get into a next topic here. You have done so much in your life, and you've done it very well. You're very successful. And I just want to know, is there any wisdom or any knowledge out there that you have gained over the years that you could share with our listeners today?
Yeah. I think if you look at my life and I look at your life, Brian, you're a classic example of this. Is we know that all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And that's Romans 8:28. And I look at, you didn't pick what happened to you and what came to you at the hands of the VA. But because of God's working in and through your life, you took that pain, you took that tragedy, and you turned it into a blessing for millions of people. What Satan meant for evil, to destroy you, to destroy your marriage, to destroy your family, and God used for good. God turned that terrible event into a blessing for a lot of people. And, it's something you heard at Mighty Oaks when you went through Mighty Oaks. The two most important days in a person's life is the day they're born and the day they realize why. And God made you for this time, for this purpose. And I think that when we start looking at our lives through the eyes of God, we start to see that he has a purpose in everything that he's allowed me to go through and experience, that nothing has come into our lives that didn't pass through God's hand, that he allowed, including all the really, really painful, hideous, painful stuff, the evil stuff that Satan has put on our life. Mm-hmm. God somehow turns it around and uses it for good, for his honor and his glory. It's amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is definitely something that you really can't put into words unless you are actually experiencing, how it feels to have been called and to answer that call of service. And like I made a Facebook post yesterday, and just to sum it up, it says, if it wasn't for my daily walks and my mindfulness when I'm out just looking at the trees and the sky and everything else like that, maybe I would have never seen or heard that calling, when it was placed on my heart to say, you know what, you need to start doing these podcasts because a lot of guys, from your experience. And what better way is to reconnect with all of these incredible men and women that I've built relationships over the years to tell their story, because their stories matter and their stories are going to help other people. And by helping other people, we are ultimately helping our country, our community, our states, from, the bottom up. And, that's the mission here. And that's the goal. So I'd like to know, what is your most rewarding experience in your life?
Most rewarding, or what I'm most thankful for? If it's most thankful for, I'm most thankful for Babette, my wife. The first few years of marriage were tough. She's the oldest, I'm the youngest. I didn't finish college. She finished with, an MBA. She came from a broken family. I did not. I came from a family with, that was very faith driven. She did not. I mean, we could not have been more different. We're also 4 years apart in age. And yet, if I look back on 30 plus years of marriage, I could not, if I was God, I could not have picked a better person for me. Anything that I've achieved in my life, it's been because of what God did in and through my wife, Babette. And I'm so thankful for her. If it's the most rewarding thing, I would say it would be Mighty Oaks. And again, I didn't pick that either. I just, in God's providence, he brought Chad and Kathy into our lives. And there's nothing in business that I've done. There's nothing in politics that I've been a part of. And I've gotten to be a part of some really cool stuff in politics and pass some really important pieces of legislation. But none of it compares to what I've been blessed experience with Mighty Oaks. I'm just so thankful for it.
Those are two good things, your life partner, and Mighty Oaks, that's, serving veterans through God, essentially. And that's, those are two great answers there. Life isn't always easy. Even though a guy like yourself, you make it look very easy. I'm joking. At times. I know the life of a state rep is definitely not easy. I was just trying to bring out a little bit of my facetiousness.
I like a little levity is okay, buddy.
But what has been the toughest experience in your life?
Toughest event would be probably losing my buddy Kevin back in 2010. Toughest period of time would be, I went through a period when I went through a period when Connor was first born, where just all the things that I had looked forward to, I was lining up to leave my current position and head towards a new position. And it was a ministry position that fell through, and it just was a very dark time for me. But I think in the midst of it, God saw me through all of it. And it's coming out of the tunnel and being able to look back 20 years in your life and see that God brought you through that really, really dark time. In fact, it was a really dark time to the point where I can remember I'd come home. I just hated my job. I just hated it with a passion. And again, what I was going to do fell through. I would get home at the end of the night and I'd go sit in the living room, in a dark living room. I would just stare out the window. And I can remember Babette bringing Connor in and putting him on my lap to remind me I was a dad and that I still had a family. And but God saw me through that. God saw me through those tough times. And if it wasn't for him and if it wasn't for the Lord and my family, I wouldn't be with you today. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Steve.
Yeah.
That's important, family, children. That's number one. You got to always, take care of them and, give them the time and, and also let them know that you love them, and then also feel that the love that they're giving you. That's what makes everything good. Is love. And I'd like to know what's next for Steve Toth as we enter into another holiday season here of election time. And, I know you're going to be very busy here. You're going to be burning, the candle on both ends here. Can people connect with you? Can people volunteer?
Sure. Yeah, you can go to my website or you can give me a call, 281-770-7287. I am known for giving out my cell phone number. And it's funny because most politicians won't give out their cell phone number. They're convinced that everybody in the world is going to be calling them every minute. They won't. No one really knows.
Give me that number. Give me that number again, Steve.
Yeah, 281-770-7287. And if me or my office can serve you, we would love to do that.
There you go, folks. You've heard it from your Texas House representative. If you need anything, even lunch, perhaps, call 281-770-7287 today. And don't take Whataburger for an answer. Republic, the Republic Grill that we go to a lot, and then the Black Walnut Cafe.
Actually, it's In-N-Out Burgers for me now.
Oh yeah, I think that's good.
So
It really,
In and Out is a very conservative company. Whataburger's been bought by a big capital fund out of Chicago, Illinois. Whataburger is actually owned by a Christian family in California.
hmm
They're rock solid conservatives. They love Mighty Oaks. If you
hmm
take your Coca-Cola or a root beer cup and turn it upside down, you'll see a scripture verse inside it.
yeah.
They're a great company.
Yes, I'm very familiar with the leadership.
And
At,
don't criticize the wimpy fries. The fries are a little loose because they're not
yeah,
frozen. They're cut fresh right in front of you because they're not dry, all dried
that's the
out.
only gripe I've got. But the burgers are great. I
The
like.
burgers are, and order off the menu. Get a 4x4.
Oh yeah, it's very rare that you get a hamburger that actually looks like the picture.
Yeah,
Like it looks like you're looking at the menu and you're like, oh, well, I want that, and they give it to you, and it looks just like that. And I'm like,
yeah.
oh wow,
Get a 4x4 though. It's four patties, 4 pieces of cheese, and Tally, you and I are going to go there sometime, and I'll see if I can whoop you. So I beat Gordy Bunch once. I don't know if I can beat you, but
I can eat. But I've been on a big diet lately, trying to get back down to about 240.
I lost 20 pounds. I'm doing intermittent fasting.
Yep, I'm on a big fast right now. I think I'm on 30 hours right now, and I'm going to do it
1
2
meal a
days.
day. I've been doing this for like 2.5 months. It's 3 months, 1 meal a day, and man, I've never felt so good.
Yeah, I'm 2.5 years in on my intermittent fasting, and it has definitely helped me a lot.
Good.
Not with just my weight, but helping a lot of the internal organs that were damaged through my infection, and my bladder and kidney, and so on and so forth. So I'm a believer, and I continue to do it every single day. I'm very disciplined when it comes to it. I know when to eat, and I know when not to eat. And people say, well, how do you just not eat? I just don't eat. I mean, it's just, I'll have a water, and it's just discipline. It's knowing I want to achieve this goal. And if eating is in the way of me achieving this goal, well, then I'm not going to eat. That doesn't mean I'm going to starve myself. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to put the proper nutrients into my body to get through the day, because I do. Because when I do eat, it is a solid meal, and then I take all my vitamins and all that stuff and get loaded up with all the good stuff, and that will get me through to the next 24 to 28 hours. So It's all in how you do it, and of course, trial and error. Especially you've only been doing it 2.5 months. You may come to some time here, you're like, man, I might need to change some things up a little bit. But, for me now, 2.5 years, I've got it down pat. I do change it up a little bit to get into the more autophagy state, the recycling of your body. And once you figure that out, it is definitely an art, and it starts to improve everything, even your mental health, your physical health, your skin. It starts to heal your body. So many people in this country eat constantly, and when your body is constantly breaking down food, it's never healing and it's never resting.
Right.
And I've learned so much through that, and so I'm glad to see that you're doing it and that you're a believer.
It's amazing. So I used to around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd want to take a power nap, 10-15 minutes, just close my eyes. Not anymore. It just, you don't go through those sugar lulls anymore, because it right after lunch, your pancreas isn't secreting all this insulin into your system to wipe out all the sugar. And then you become sugar deficient. I just eat 1 meal a day, and I just eat whatever I want.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It definitely has been the cure all for me, on my weight. For sure, and keeping it manageable. And when you're eating 1 time a day, your stomach's a little smaller, so you're not eating as much.
Yeah. Yep.
You eat till you're full, and then you're good. So that's definitely something that I do recommend for everybody out there to at least try, or at least talk to your doctor about it to see if it's right for you. So, Steve, I want to close this out. And I do again want to thank you for joining us today, Representative Steve Toth. We sincerely appreciate everything you have done for our great nation. Your service, sacrifice, and dedication to the state of Texas and the veteran community is truly admirable.
Brian, I love you, and I'm so proud of you. I'm thankful to call you my friend. And you're a shining example of what happens when you trust God with all your hurts and pain, that God can make something really beautiful out of it.
Amen. And I love you too, brother. Until next time, folks, for Tuesdays with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God bless.